All right, the time is 6 p.m. Our regular city council meeting for March 18, 2025 is now in session. First on the agenda is Councilmember Westbrook will lead us with the opening prayers and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. Please rise.
Good evening, everybody stand. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with hearts filled with gratitude and humility as we prepare to serve the people of this great city. On this occasion, as we honor Women's History Month, we pause to reflect on the extraordinary virtues displayed by women throughout history, both in Scripture and in our own lives. We give thanks for the wisdom of Deborah, the judge and prophet, who led her people with courage and discernment. May we do the same. We remember the faithfulness of Ruth, whose loyalty and commitment to her family reminds us to serve our community with indefatigable love and compassion. May we do the same. We celebrate the resilience of Esther, who risked everything to speak up for her people. As her voice was used to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves, may we do the same. We are inspired by Mary Magdalene, a faithful witness to your truth and grace and who sought what is right and true. May we do the same. Lord, as we undertake the work of governance, remind us that our responsibility is not for personal gain, but for the common good. Help us to serve with humility, patience, and a servant's heart, honoring the legacy of women who have paved the way for progress and justice. Bless this meeting today and guide our discussions and decisions. May they reflect your love and bring peace, prosperity, and hope to our city. In your holy name, we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Councilmember Westbrook. Okay, I have a special announcement. As a reminder, students who are participating in the Hal Baldwin Scholarship are required to sign in on the sheet located in the back. If you are viewing this on YouTube, you can email us at sgonzalez@schertz.com. That's SGONZALEZ@schertz.com. All right. First on the agenda is city events and announcements. Announcements of upcoming events. Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple for tonight. So on Sunday, March 23rd is a nature scavenger hunt at Crescent Bend Nature Park. That'll be at 3:30 p.m. On Friday, March 28th, we have our City Council pre-budget retreat, 8:30 a.m. here in the City Council chambers. Note that on Saturday, March 30th, our kickball season starts, and that's going to be in Thulmeyer Park at 6 p.m. And then finally, our next meeting will be back here April 1st at 6 p.m. in the council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, announcements and recognitions by our city manager, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick announcements. Sydney Garcia in the EMS department was promoted from EMT to paramedic, so congratulations to Sydney. Also, the Economic Development Department, the Schertz Economic Development Corporation, was honored by the Texas Economic Development Council and achieved the 2024 Economic Excellence Recognition Award. And they are among an elite group of 71 organizations that were recognized for this outstanding accomplishment. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right. Announcements and recognition by the mayor. I have none, so we'll move on. Next on the agenda is the hearing of residents. This time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the city council. Each person is limited to 3 minutes, and we ask before addressing the council, for the record, please state your name and address. We also do have a public hearing scheduled on the agenda today, and you may speak at the public hearing, the hearing of residents, or both. The choice is yours. Our first speaker today is Stephen Stark.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I am Stephen Stark from 3900 Arroyo Seco, Schertz, Texas, and I'm here to express our concerns as the HOA, Arroyo Verde, about the public hearing, the water portion. It's not the actual CIP plan itself or the fees, but they're showing, again, a location, and I get the location for what a comprehensive plan does, but the red line that shows what we objected to is still there. We only see the one plan that the city has put forward. We haven't seen anything else, and Brian has been very good at keeping me up to date. It's on hold and all that good stuff, but I would like to invite the city council members out. Give me a call. Can I do that? Give them a phone number? Is that okay? Give me a call at 210-788-5473 so I can show you the location. We're not asking you to get out of the red line that's already in the comprehensive plan. It's just put it on the other side and not be in our backyard. Because right now, the proposed plan shows it right next to the backyard fences of the people that are right on the green belt. And you're going to take a 20-foot swath of all of the trees in order to build that water line if it goes there. We would like to put it on the other side of our drainage ditch, which is running along the commercial development. And that's the only part that we don't like as an HOA, is it having right in our backyard, right up next to the fence, because our sidewalk is going to go on top of it, or a walkway. And that's nice, it's a nice park area, but you're going to have every dog barking as you walk by, because I've done that on several other parks that have the walkway right in the backyard. It's nice, but I don't think the residents would really like it, and ours don't. We voted on this, and 100% of the owners said no. We didn't like it at the current location, but we're not moving it out of the red line that's shown in the comprehensive plan. We just want to kind of move it next to up towards next to Highway 3009 and away from our backyards. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Maggie Titterton.
Good evening, Council. In reference to the prayer tonight, Councilman Westbrook, thank you so much in the city of Schertz for such a lovely lunch last week, honoring women in business and the city governments in the area. It was unexpected. It was quite a beautiful lunch, so thank you so much for that. Also, I want to give a shout out and thanks to not only Brian James and his office, Tammy Lawrence in particular. We had a chamber member that was dealing with some issues with a contractor with sidewalks that are being put in over by the Starbucks area, Tri-County Corridor Parkway, and mounds of dirt and debris and trash and things that had been there for several weeks. And the city was so expeditious in getting this done, and I believe it was Tammy in particular that was really dogged in trying to find out who the contractor was. In less than a week, the piles of dirt and things were moved out of the way and gone. So thank you all so much for that. Really appreciate that. This Friday, March 21st at 5 p.m., an icon in the city of Schertz, Abel Gomez and his wife Armida, they had retired. They had sold Abel's Diner in January, but we're going to do an official retirement, send-off, farewell, kickoff at Bluebonnet Palace. It's at 5 p.m., 5 to 8 p.m. this Friday. It's free. The Johns family is sponsoring the dinner for everybody that is coming, and we are taking up donations in a vacation-themed box to see if we can send Abel and Armida on the vacation they haven't taken in 34 years. So if you all want to, please come out and have a chance to thank Abel and Armida for all they've done for our community, and have some really good food at Bluebonnet. On the 28th, we have Coffee with the Chamber at our Schertz location from 7:30 to 9. Please come and all have some free coffee and treats. On the 9th, we have Shred Day. That is done by our Hyper, our Young Professionals Committee, and it's going to benefit communities and schools. It's from 9 to 12 at the Schertz location, 1730 Schertz Parkway. You can bring up to 5 boxes of items to be shred, papers, no electronics, and it is free shredding, but we are, however, asking if somebody wants to make a donation, and 50% of the proceeds after we take care of the expenses are going to communities and schools. And last but not least, April 4th, please mark your calendar. Another new business being welcomed to Schertz, a Twisted Tree advertising agency. We're going to do a ribbon cutting at our Schertz location, 1730 Schertz Parkway at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Next is Carmel Terrell.
Good evening. I'm Carmel Terrell, located at 12715 Sherlock Lane. and I'm here as part of the Chamber's Leadership Corps class, so I'm just here to observe. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on. Next on the agenda is consent agenda items. These are self-explanatory items that are provided to council and available for public viewing. And if council can remove any of the items that are presented on the consent agenda items. First is the minutes. Number 2 is appointments, reappointments, and resignations of city boards, commissions, and committees. Item number 3 is resolution number 25R035. Item number 4 is resolution 25R026. Council, do any of these need to be removed for separate action? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve with consent agenda items 1 through 4?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion was made by Councilmember Macaluso or Councilmember Davis? Okay, and second by Councilmember Westbrook. Council, any comments? Please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 5 ayes, no objections, motion passes. All right, we'll move on to item number 5, resolution number 25R034, accepting the audit report and the annual comprehensive financial report. Mr. Walters, floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is James Walters. I'm the Finance Director here for the City of Schertz. Tonight we have a resolution before you to accept our annual comprehensive financial report, which is the culmination of the entirety of our financial performance for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Going into it, we do have Travis Rogers from our auditing firm, Patillo, Brown & Hill, to kind of go into more detail, as well as we had met with the audit committee consisting of finance representatives, the city manager's office, and 3 members of council to go into the report in a little more detail, go over any sort of findings or suggestions from the auditors. Luckily, we had a very good report. The auditors didn't find anything material and upheld that our financial controls are still very good with no incidents to report. So I'll turn it over to Travis to kind of go hit some highlights of the report, and then we'll be able to answer any questions you still may have over the report or over our process of accounting. Mike, you have each of those right there.
All right. Thank you, James, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. My name is Travis Rogers. I am a CPA with Patillo, Brown & Hill, based out of Waco, and here to share with you this evening the results of the fiscal year 2024 financial audit. I believe you have each received, or should have received, a copy of the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 2024. I'm going to sort of cover a couple of quick highlights in this document, and we'll reference the page number for each item. It's going to begin at the very beginning on page 1 with the independent auditor's report. So this is the same standardized letter you're all used to seeing in prior years. Has the standardized language about our responsibility as the city's outside auditors for rendering an opinion on these financial statements based on our audit. Also on the responsibility of the management of the city for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements in accordance with US GAAP. All fun stuff, but you will see towards the top of page 1 where it says report on the audit of the financial statements and opinions, the second paragraph down under that header where it says, in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects, respective financial position, changes in financial position, and cash flows as of and for the year ended September 30th, 2024. So that's what we call an unmodified or a clean opinion, meaning that as a result of our audit over the city's financial statements, financial records for fiscal year 2024, no material departures from U.S. generally accepted accounting principles were noted. So this is the highest level of assurance we can provide as the city's outside auditors under our professional standards. Like I said, that's the main highlight. Rest of the letter is mainly standardized language about responsibilities, various other items. I'm going to briefly point out one highlight. Also in the financial statements, flipping a little bit to page 17, just on the governmental fund balance sheet, highlights all of the city's major funds as of for the year ended September 30th, 2024, including the general or main operating fund. Just wanted to briefly point out down towards the bottom of page 17, where you can see total fund balance for the general fund of 17.9 million, just a little under 18 million as of September 30th, 2024. Just going to compare that to a couple pages over on page 20 on the income statement, which shows the revenues and expenditures of those same major funds for fiscal year 2024. I was going to compare that 17.9 million in fund balance. We also see the general fund had just over 46 million of expenditures for fiscal year 2024. If we compare that 17.9 million in fund balance to the 46 million in expenditures, if we're talking in terms of, let's say, months out of the year, the city is reporting between 4.5 and 5 months of expenditures in fund balance for the general fund. And varies, but classic rule of thumb is shoot for a reserve of 3 to 6 months minimum. So if you're in the middle or towards the higher end of that range, you have what we would call a healthy fund balance or a healthy reserve. Those were the two main highlights. Wanted to point out in the annual comprehensive financial report, there were 2 other documents issued separately: the city's single audit report and also a letter that is over our required communication with you, the governing body of the city of Schertz. Essentially, without going into too much detail, those reports summarize the results of the city's federal single audit for fiscal year 2024. If there were any findings or questioned costs related to that single audit, or any findings related to internal control over financial reporting for the city, any other issues or concerns of that nature, we would communicate them to you in one of those 2 documents. Thankfully, you can report, again, as with the financial statements, unmodified, clean opinion over the federal single audit, and no findings or question costs or other matters need to be communicated to you, the city council. So that was the Reader's Digest version, but if any of you have any questions or comments, et cetera, while you have me here.
All right, thank you. Council, any comments? No comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve resolution number 25R034, accepting the audit report and financial report?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Brown and second by Councilmember Westbrook. Any other comments? Council, please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 5 ayes, no objections, motion passes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll move on to item number 6, resolution number 25R021, authorizing the approval of a development agreement with BFR LLC for the approximate 30-acre tract at 1518 and Woman Hollering Road. This item has been tabled, and we'll put it on our next meeting. So we'll move on to item number 7, resolution number 25R005, approving a utility service extension request for the Woman Hollering Townhomes. This item has also been tabled and will be provided at our next meeting. So we'll move on to a public hearing. Public hearing for presentation and discussion regarding amendments to the City of Schertz water and wastewater land use assumption and capital improvement plans and impact fees. Ms. Woodley, floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy to be here this evening. We have our consultant here to do most of the presentation. I'm going to butt in a few times to add to his presentation, but before we get started, I did want to address something that the citizen mentioned as far as the actual location of the lines that are shown on these plans. They are approximate, going basically from point A to point B in generally an alignment that might work, but it does not lock in the alignment. So the project that I think was being referred to is the transmission main that will run from the East Live Oak water tanks to the I-35 water tank, and that project is on hold for the time being. We have not progressed with looking at alternatives, but we will. So the line that's shown on the map is not specifically in the location it's shown on the map. That's just an approximate location. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear so things don't get muddied. I have Lee Ham here, who's an engineer with LAN, who has worked with us over the past years to come up with this plan. He's going to talk to you about the land use assumptions, the capital improvement plan, and how those projects were selected, and then also talk about the costs associated with those projects and how the maximum assessable impact fees are calculated. And then we'll have a conversation about setting the rates. So with that, Lee?
Thank you, Kathy, Mayor, Council. As Kathy mentioned, I'll be going over the impact fee and capital improvement plan that we put together for the city of Schertz. General agenda, we'll be going just a quick look at the land use assumptions. Then we'll go into a quick overview of how we develop the CIP cost to give you an idea of where those numbers come from and how we develop them, what the living unit equivalents are and what they mean as far as impact fees go. Credit analysis, this has to do with Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 395, and how impact fees can be assessed. The maximum impact fee that we calculated based upon the above items. And then kind of a local impact fee comparison just to see so that the city can see where they line up with similar municipalities in the area. And then kind of a look at the schedule and then some information that Kathy will run over. So a quick look at the land use assumptions overview. Again, this is a high level look, just kind of what the assumptions that we came up with and used to develop this plan. There's a basis of 3 elements. We took the 2018 land use plan map, took the existing land uses that had changed from that land use plan, and then any proposed developments. We worked hand in hand with the city staff and looked at developments as they came up to make sure that we incorporated those in where the growth was going to occur in the city. We also modified based on information received from the city up to April 8th, 2022. A big key point was to assume that any of these developments, existing or proposed, was going to remain in place for the 30-year planning period, that there wasn't going to be any major redevelopment of like a residential area into a commercial area, that it was going to stay the same for the 30-year planning period. That the new growth would expand away from the city center, specifically like this area. It's mostly built out, so you would expect most of the growth to occur in the areas that are relatively empty and are less dense than the city center would be. And that the development pressure would likely be along the I-35 corridor. As y'all know, I-35 is a very busy, happening place, and so there's lots of growth and lots of movement and potential for growth in that area. Another key one was that regions that currently do not lie within the city's water or sewer CCN would still remain, so that the city was not looking to expand its CCN over the 30-year planning period. This means that as the area that you're going to serve now is the area you're going to continue to serve for the next 30 years. And that they would remain in place for that 30-year planning period. So developing the CIP cost, 3 main elements that I'm going to go over. We're going to talk about what the cost data, how we came up with that, how we developed an inflation rate that we felt would be useful for developing cost over the next 10 to 30 years, and then which projects were eligible for the cost for inclusion into the impact fee. Texas Local Government Code has, Chapter 395 has specific elements that dictate what you can include and what you cannot include. So this is a very busy slide, but just mainly to point out that when you're developing cost estimates and estimation of different construction projects. There's different classes that you can use. This is kind of an industry standard. And it was felt that as you have a high level where you're not, as Kathy mentioned, you don't have a specific alignment, you don't have survey to go along with it and all that, that you have unknowns that occur with these projects. And so you want to include a contingency, and the contingency gets larger the more unknowns that there are. And so at this relatively high level of a capital improvements plan, the class 4 is selected, so a contingency amount of 30% was included with all the projects, just to make sure that we captured the potential for any unknowns. The sources of the cost data, we use TxDOT online reports. TxDOT publishes all of its lowest bid items, and as they go through the year, we took that into account. We used RS means, which is a standard for estimating construction as you go through. And then cost estimates and bid tabulations from past and current city projects, and the same from past and current city or current LAM projects. Put all those together to come up with the different costs for the different items, such as the pipe and the valves and the hydrants and the manholes and all those various items. To go along with that, we calculated an inflation rate. So as y'all are fully aware, since 2020, the inflation has been significant. And so we want to make sure that the city takes that into account as they move forward. And so we took 3 different indices into account: the RS means historical, the Mortensen historical inflation index, and then the Turner historical inflation index, and took different time periods, some from 2020 to 2024, and then for the entire period. As you can see here on the table, we've broken it down just to kind of see how it's changed throughout the years. You don't want to go over a short time period and have an extreme inflation rate as shown from like 2020 to 2023, but you also don't want to make sure that you're capturing those time frames when you do have high inflation or incorporating those. And so all that to say is that we found an average of 4.86%, but averages can be skewed by outliers. And so we chose the median, which is the middle number. And so that indicates that half of the numbers are on this side and half of the numbers are on this side when you do a median. And so the median of 3.91% was chosen. As I mentioned earlier, eligible project costs, they are specifically laid out in the Texas Local Government Code, Section 395, of what you can include. Basically, it's any projects that occur in the first 10 years of the planning period. Anything from 10 years on, you cannot include. It has to occur in the next 10 years. And you have to do a utilization percentage as well. What percentage? So if you have a project that you're building in 2030, but you know that additional growth is going to occur out to 2050, you want to make sure that you size that project to occur out to 2050, even though you're building it for the 2030 planning period. And so you need to account for that utilization. How much are we going to use that project by 2030? And so we did that for all the projects. And that utilization percentage is shown by those 2 equations there. There are a couple of unique cases where, because of a future project, the 2030 flow rate would actually be less in 2050. And so just because you would have a new project come online, it would take some of the capacity of that 2030 line. And so we used the 2030 as the peak. But that was just for a few unique cases. This is an example of a project cost sheet. I won't go into too much detail. This is what we call a cut sheet on our side of the fence. And it has basically a description of the project, what the justification for this project is, the different items that we anticipate that's going to go into place with, for example, on this specific instance, the water line, gate valves, fire hydrants, different connections if you're replacing meters or anything like that. If you're having to go through a road and you're going to have to replace surface and all that. So we use those costs that we developed that I talked about earlier, applied those to each of those items. And then we have a mobilization that also goes into effect because the contractor has to mobilize and move out there, bring equipment, hire equipment early. And then the contingency, that 30% contingency I talked about. And then 395 also allows you to incorporate the construction services and professional services that you may incur for designing the line, or if you're having to get easements, things like that. They also allow you to include that into the cost. So I'll try not to bore everybody to tears too much with going too much into detail on this, but these are near term. So there's both water and sewer. There are near term projects. Those are projects that are anticipated to be needed for current system improvements. We need to solve a problem that's occurring with the system right now. But along with those, there is some growth potential in some of those projects. And so we wanted to make sure that those were captured in the impact fee. And so you can see on this specific case, there's 3 projects that have growth potential, and those that it's going to be used by the year 2030. And so in the impact fee eligible portion for these near-term projects, these are not the 10-year horizon, these are the near future projects, is roughly $1.5 million. Moving on to the 10-year horizon, what we call the 2030 projects, this is out from the 10-year. All these projects have some utilization rate because they're going to be used in the 10-year horizon by 2030. So these all add up to, all these different projects add up to approximately $64.5 million that are impact fee eligible. And these are the 2050 project costs, and these are not eligible because they're outside of that 10-year window. But they're still necessary for future build-out and future anticipated future growth. These are the near-term wastewater projects. On these, there was a few more of these that were impact fee eligible just because of the nature of gravity sewer lines. It doesn't take much, you can go from a 12-inch to a 15-inch and you have significant capacity increase. So there's always a little more potential for growth in sewer lines than there is in water lines. Water lines are usually specifically designed. And so there's a little more available for the near-term projects, $21.1 or $21.2 million roughly. And here's the 10-year horizon wastewater projects. As you can see, there's a pretty big list, but the growth projects and then the system improvement projects all total out to about $23.5 million. That is impact fee eligible. And then again, the 2050 projects that are not impact fee eligible for inclusion in the impact fee calculation. So a long definition here, but basically you want to have some standard unit that you're comparing all of your different growth that's occurring in your city to. Living unit equivalents, equivalent dwelling units, there's many different ways to call this, but basically it's typically boiled down to because most cities have lots of residential single-family homes, that's considered the equivalent that everybody breaks it down to. All that definition basically breaks that down to. So we define that one water living unit equivalent is equal to a typical residential water meter. So as you can see here, based upon the flows that we did in our modeling and the number of living unit equivalents, a living unit equivalent flow rate is approximately 0.17 gallons per minute, not gallons per day, but gallons per minute per LUE. And then working that out, you wind up with a growth in the residential and the growth in the other of just over 7,000 growth. And then the wastewater, because you can meter water, but you can't meter wastewater. You don't have a flow meter outside, checking the sewage that's coming out of a home. And so there has to be some way to kind of estimate that, and kind of an industry standard to use 70% of the water so that the other 30% is irrigation and items like that. And so that the 70% of the water LUE is assumed to be the wastewater LUE. So that means that the water LUE, as I mentioned, was 0.17 gallons per minute. The wastewater calculates out to about 0.119 gallons per minute, 70%. And so you wind up with a growth of just over 7,000 LUEs in the 10-year horizon. So a lot of information on this slide as well, but it all boils down to 395, the Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 395 requires that all cities give a credit for how the future growth is going to provide taxes and service money and paying water and sewer fees and all that. So you have to credit that to that growth. And there's 2 ways you can do that. You can go through and look at how much anticipated ad valorem tax and how much anticipated utility service revenues you're going to get from that anticipated growth, or you can just take it flat, cut your maximum impact fee in half, and that's what you get. The city elected with their financial consultant of Wildan Financial Services, and this is the credits that they came up with. So significantly less than 50%. So it allows more of the rate to be applied to the impact fee. So, and here's the news that everybody's looking forward to. So Looking at the impact fee eligible cost for the water impact fees, $65.9 million. Subtract the credit of $3.36 million. You wind up with a total impact fee eligible cost of just over $62.5 million. Divide that by the growth in LUEs, you wind up with a maximum allowable impact fee of $8,814. The same methodology is used for the wastewater impact fee, and you wind up with a maximum allowable wastewater impact fee of $5,556. As part of our coordination with the city, we also looked at if we were to size those LUEs by meter, because that's typically how you're going to have a developer come in, they're going to be looking for a certain meter size, and they're going to provide you what they anticipate their meter size is going to be for their development. And this is what you would equivalence for how LUEs can also be equivalents in meter sizes. And this would be the rough cost if based upon the LUEs of the 5/8 inch meter is expected to be the typical residential meter. So that would be your one LUE. So a quick look at the local impact fee comparison. So the current impact fees for Schertz is the second from the bottom. It's not a race. It's not to see who's the most expensive, but it just shows currently where you sit in comparison to your local geographic area and the, Saws and Austin and Bernie and similar areas in this area. And the proposed ones are more towards the middle of the pack. And so, not necessarily a bad place to be in the middle of the pack. And I think this is it. Yeah.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, so looking at what you want to do with these numbers. So the maximum fees are as calculated if you accept the land use assumptions and the capital improvement plan that's been put together. The calculation is objective as far as the maximum allowable amount that you could charge. So you could decide to simply adopt those maximum fees, or you could look at a percentage of the fees. I will point out we had Dan Jackson and James Walters look at, okay, if we didn't charge the maximum fees and we still wanted to do the same projects, who would pay for that? It would be the ratepayers and the rest of the citizens of Schertz. So what they came up with was that a 10% reduction from the maximum fee would require approximately a 1% increase in rates for everyone in the city versus the fee being paid by the new developers. So when we went to the CIAC, the Capital Improvement Advisory Commission, they debated this. They did feel that there should be a grace period. They did not recommend a particular grace period. Staff is recommending July 1st, 2025. So in other words, the fees would remain as they are until that point. So it gives folks time to sort of prepare for it. If you'd like to look at a different date, either sooner or later, that's certainly up to you guys. What CIAC did recommend is the phase-in of the rate as shown on this slide. So during year one, whenever that date starts, whether it's July 1st or October 1st, during the first year after that period of time, we would raise the rates from what they currently are to 50% of the maximum for water and for wastewater. During the second year of implementation, it would go up to 75% of the maximum, and by year three, be set at 100% of the maximum. Remember, the rates do get assessed at the time of recordation of the final plat, and so if a plat is approved at any time after this new impact fee is set, the maximum rate governs. When someone pulls a building permit, they're charged the rate at the time. So if a plat is approved in this September and someone comes in during year two, they would pay the 75% of the maximum if that's what you chose to do. So we can answer other questions, but this 50, 75, 100% phase-in is what was recommended by CIAC. Of course, you're welcome to choose a different phase-in, but that was what was recommended.
This is just a quick look at the schedule and where we are in the schedule. We've proceeded through. We're now at March 18th for the first council hearing. And then we will have one subsequent hearing on April 1st for the adoption.
Yeah, so to clarify on that, we'll bring at the next meeting on April 1st, we'll have another public hearing, and that will be for you all to formally adopt the land use amendments, the CIP, and the impact fees. So hopefully you'll get a good feeling this evening on which way you want to go with the fees and any phase-in schedule. And then we'll also bring the ordinance that will actually put that into code. So we'll actually so there won't be any action this evening, but we'll sort of get a consensus of where you're headed on what you want to do with the fee. Okay.
All right, thank you, Ms. Woolley. Thank you, Travis. All right, this item is on the agenda as an open public hearing. The start time is 6:41. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to address the council in reference to this subject? Going once. Going twice. All right, public hearing is closed at 6:42. Council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Macaluso.
Could we get the opinion of the EDC?
So we did do a presentation to EDC about this, and while they're not the formal recommending body to council, they did provide some feedback. They also expressed their support of the maximum fee, and they would prefer to see a faster phase-in period.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, this is how we're going to fund what we know we need to do, plain and simple. It's just a matter of how much, how fast. I like the phase-in period, the way that it's proposed here. Builders are going to pass this along anyway. It's not like they're going to be sucking it up. So it's not going to be an additional burden on the builders. They're just going to have to reprice their products. But at the same time, you don't want to shock them too much, too early. And also gives everybody, it more aligns with inflationary adjustments than just one-time big shot. So based on what I've seen and what I've heard, appreciate the efforts there. I personally think that's going to be the right way to go.
Councilmember Davis.
Yeah, I'm okay with the phase-in part as well, but when we talk about the 90% option versus the 100%, a lot of these projects benefit the rest of the community as well, don't they? So if we're replacing lines, and what caught my eyes in some of the things that we've seen there, we're replacing aging lines that may have leaks or other problems. Yeah, well, we may be upsizing the line because of additional development. The fact of the matter is, if we didn't have that development, we'd be replacing the line anyway. So I myself kind of like the idea of the 90% option, and that eases the burden somewhat, not entirely on new development, but it also allows us to spread the wealth across the community. Because in fact, like I said, if it's a leaking line or something else that has to be replaced, I mean, that's something that the community has to understand has to occur. And we see that throughout a lot of parts of Schertz, especially the center part, the older part, where there's existing problems that we're trying to correct.
May I address that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please do.
So I do just want to point out that Any project that's replacing a line size for size is not included in the impact fee plan. It is included in the master plan in some cases. There are some lines in here that are being replaced. I think the example he showed of the project cut sheet was a Bubbling Springs line. It's a 6-inch line, it's too small, and it's leaking, so it needs to be replaced, but we're replacing it with a 12-inch. And so the portion of the cost of that project that's factored into the calculation of the impact fee does not include straight replacement of the line. It only includes the increased capacity and the usage of that, the projected usage of that capacity. So just want to make sure that that we made that clear.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Councilmember Westbrook.
Yes, Mayor. So, Kathy, in reference to the EDC, they wanted a faster phase-in than a 3-year?
Correct.
How much faster? And why?
How much faster?
A couple perspectives, and Scott can certainly chime in. They didn't say specifically, and I'll offer this up because I think folks may be surprised to hear EDC or you know, I talking with Maggie with the chamber a little bit on this. So part of the issue on this, as Kathy kind of hit to the chase on, is there are really a couple questions to it. One is, who do you want to pay for it, right? And it's either existing ratepayers, businesses and residents, or it's new development, and however you want to adjust that balance. The other is, how quickly do you want to put that infrastructure in? And so while it may seem easier to set a lower rate, not even go up on regular rates as much, then we lag behind on infrastructure, and that becomes a challenge for businesses sort of moving in. And so the other aspect I think that was a little bit at play, and I'll say this, and Scott may disagree, is that certainly, as you know from some of the incentive agreements that the EDC comes forward with, oftentimes part of what's the intent of those is to cover some of those costs with the project, including impact fees. And that's sort of for the bigger project. The challenge tends to be the smaller projects. It's not primary jobs, things like that. But again, I think the reason EDC took that position is because they have been hearing a lot recently, and Scott can nod or shake his head, about areas of the community that it's a challenge for new development to occur because it lacks water and sewer infrastructure, right? We've had those conversations, and I think that was a lot of what probably motivated EDC of, we need to open up this land for development. The only way to do that is put in some of these things like water and sewer lines to serve new development, and so having a higher fee allows us to do that more quickly. That's my opinion as to why they took the position they took, if that helps.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Yeah, that was going to be my question as well. That's a good question, because you were saying that they want a faster phase-in, correct? And that was going to be my question, why? But can you find out why from them?
So we could ask, I mean, again, my assumption is keep this in mind. So for every month or year we delay going to the maximum, that's lost revenue we would collect from the impact fees, right? And so the longer you phase in, there's that gap that either slows the construction of infrastructure or it shifts that burden onto somebody else. We can certainly ask them that question at their next meeting. We can put it on the agenda and try to get clarification, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. It's this idea of we're struggling to have development occur in some areas because of lack of infrastructure. The fee helps go to pay for that, and I think the feeling was generally, rather than burden existing businesses and residents who they feel have kind of paid their fair share, put it on new development. But I certainly think, you know, again, as a comparison, council will remember this, with roadway impact fees, we charge near the maximum for residential. We're charging 18 cents on the dollar for commercial, right? It was a policy decision that we made that makes sense. So there's that too.
Yeah, if you can get clarification, that would be
Certainly can.
awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Macaluso.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, I'm aware of the areas that are lacking infrastructure, and the expense of it is very significant. And I do agree that the new developments that come in should carry a heavy, you know, a large burden of that instead of the current residents. So I definitely support, increasing the fees. I think just finding that, how quickly is going to be what we're looking for. But to me, I think the sooner the better. Obviously, we're undercharging pretty significantly according to that chart. And so putting us middle of the line, I think is more than fair.
Yeah, and I will say this, I think traditionally in Schertz, we have proposed a fairly generous phase-in. I think a lot of the logic of that is ultimately it benefits our community to get to that higher fee, even if it takes us a little bit longer, as opposed to everyone sort of have that shock. And so we set the fee much lower and we don't have a game plan to make up the difference.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, just a quick look at the CIP projects coming up. The majority of these are either east of 35 or even south of 78. We don't have a whole lot of that going on west of 35 in this, from what I'm looking at these projects here, short-term especially. So, by doing a phased-in impact fees, those little bit farther out projects are still going to be paying, a little bit higher rate. They're not going to come in at today's rates, just because of timing.
Councilmember Westbrook.
I'm just asking a question, is there any opposition to a 2-year phase-in? What does that look like, 50 and 100? Or right now you have a 3, or are you just looking for a direction from us? If it was a 2-year phase-in, what would that look like?
So
It could be anything.
Whatever you want, right? So what we can do, if you want to pull that slide.
Yeah, if
back
you can
up,
put that slide back in there,
we can
please.
talk about it, right? So what you could certainly do is say, look, why don't we do this? We could go up to 50% in year 1 and then 100% in year 2. We could go up 66% in year 1, 100% in 2. You can mix and match this however you want. Again, this is a fairly generous phase-in. And again, that's sort of the logic of it. So I think staff's only thing is we think it makes sense to have the effective date be a little bit out to July 1st, right? Gives a little bit of notice there. And we think it makes sense to maybe give a year or so for those people in process. That's really the key for us, and maybe not go quite up the full amount. So again, maybe if you're looking to be more aggressive, what I would say is maybe split the difference. Do year 1, say 66%, and then the full 100% on year 2.
But you're saying generous in terms of lost revenue over the 3-year period.
Generous in terms of a slower phase-in.
Yes.
And the reason we have done that, right or wrong, is in some communities, maybe folks are less engaged and don't understand the implications or other reasons. There's a lot of pushback, and what there's pressure to do is instead of going up to the maximum, even after how many years, it's to cap it at 50%. But then the problem is it's a lot of times they'll kick the can down the road and they don't deal with the implications of that. Just as a strategic matter, staff here has said, let's give a more generous phase-in, get to that higher amount, and that's more beneficial to the community. But I can appreciate council saying, in this case, we think you've been too generous, staff, and it's taken too long to hit that maximum, and that slows the development of new infrastructure. Eventually, existing folks are going to have to pick up some of that. Let's adjust that a bit. And so again, an adjustment might be year 1, 66%, and that's just kind of splitting the difference, and then year 2 going up to the max.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sort of in favor of a faster phase-in, if that's an option. I know I heard support for a 3-year phase-in, but.
Councilmember Guerrero.
I also agree with Councilman Macaluso. Definitely taking the burden off the residents and placing it on developer within reason, of course. I mean, I don't want to be here outlandish, but within reason. If it's affordable, absolutely. But taking it off the residents for sure.
Size 1. Okay. So I appreciate that. We often talk about this in terms of what it is for a single family home, right? That tends to be how we think about this. But, it's not uncommon, right, for a business to come in, a commercial business to come in with a 2-inch meter, right? So just to be clear, it's not uncommon for a commercial property to come in with a 2-inch meter. And that 2-inch meter then
It's going to be.
it is going to be significant, right? We tend to think about that $8,000 on the residential home and then the 5,000-ish on the other, so we're up around 14,000. But there's a big jump on this stuff, and so again, understand it's not insignificant in terms of what that means. So I just want to address that because you said, you know, it gets up there, but that's what can happen is we'll get a business coming in with a 2-inch domestic meter and then maybe a 3/4-inch irrigation meter, right? And so they're paying the water on the irrigation, just the water on impact fee on the irrigation, and they're paying both the water and sewer on that domestic, and it's a big jump.
Yeah, totally understandable. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
As long as it's within reason, I'm for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in where we would struggle on this, and again, you'll hear some people say, this is crazy. The problem is, this is, when you do the math, this is where the cost burden sort of falls. And so again, I think the other thing you're going to see, just to be, so we're all clear, is there are going to be more folks going to EDC on some of those new developments where potentially EDC can contribute to assist with some of those things. Now, the other thing I will say too, and Scott can come up, I appreciate that, is when a developer constructs water or sewer lines that are on the impact fee capital improvements plan, they get a credit for that, right? So if a developer comes in and they're building that 12-inch water line, right, down south, they're going to get credit for the portion they've built to add. And so part of what that does is encourage people to build infrastructure as opposed to just paying the fee.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. If I could just speak in there real quick. You know, we appreciate at the EDC the ability for y'all to come to us and kind of lay this out. We know that we're not a decision maker. We're not really even a guiding body for this type of decision, but it's nice that they brought it to us. And again, the decisions that we made on that night were just based simply upon that, you know, who's going to pay for it and at what rate do they pay it back? And at what point do we get ourselves in trouble lagging behind, like Brian's been explaining? I think that's what drove the bus for the board to say, well, we understand that this is an issue, and we wouldn't mind it if it even ramps up a little more quickly, just so there's never that issue. Keeping in mind that if there are some businesses that we really, really consider a target industry, we could then opt to help them with some of those impact fees. And I think that was the intent for the board, to kind of have a say in it. And again, appreciate you guys coming and spending the time with our board to explain that.
And then selectively do that as well.
Yes, sir.
Based on the value of the project.
For just targeted industries that we really feel would benefit the city.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, maybe again, just to because it's a little bit outside the area, but I think it's important so you make an informed decision, is right now we're just talking about the city water and sewer impact fees. And Lisa can either stand up and help, or she can sit there and not help. She's probably going to sit there. But keep in mind, somebody comes in for a project, they're charged a city roadway impact fee, they're charged a city water impact fee, a city sewer impact fee, they're charged a CCMA impact fee, or sort of the equivalent of San Antonio River Authority, a connection fee. They're charged an SSLGC impact fee, right? And then they're charged, if it's a residential, they're charged a parkland dedication fee, and then they're charged the building permit and plan check fees. So the only thing I'd caution again is this is one of a number of fees, and those do add up substantially when you get together. But again, all of those have sort of the same kind of issue associated with it. So I just want y'all to be aware of that so you don't get caught, come back, well, we were just talking about this one and you failed to mention all these other things we charge, or all these other things we charge too for the same reasons.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you for stating that, because I understand that there's a lot more impact fees than just our two here. But, you know, right now, what we're talking about, for the most part, is an increase of $10,000 per residential unit for all intents and purposes. The other ones are much higher amounts, but at the same time, that's where economic development can also come in to take some of the oh my gosh out of that out of those projects. Whereas the residential ones, we have a lot of homes on the planning books right now, and I realize that a lot of these won't be impacted by it because they're already platted, right? But those that are coming in that haven't had a chance to get platted, and we know that won't be platted until September, October, you know, we don't want to scare them away too soon, you know, but it needs to be done.
No, I totally agree with Councilmember Brown. The shock value. All of a sudden, you know, we're not just talking about 10,000 here. We're talking about everything else that adds to the cost of a new home. That's why I prefer the phase-in plan, because these developers are already working on plans. They just have not brought them over. And then all of a sudden they realize that home I was going to put in on the market for 350 is now 375.
Yeah.
And it just makes it a little, you know, we keep talking about affordable housing, and this adds to that dilemma that we're having.
Certainly does, right? Yeah, it's all of that. It's the cost of infrastructure. Again, as Kathy said, it's based on the plat filing date, so none of this applies if you've already filed the plat. Thus the kind of phase-in for July 1st and the phase-in of the fee. The other thing I'll mention again with this is we've done the system a little bit different than we had last time we did it, in that, is it accurate to say there are more lines that are system lines for impact fee than there were on the old system, right? Under the old system, we tended to pick and choose a few lines here or there, so developers would walk in and go, well, that's not an impact fee system line, you don't get credit. We did this more like our roadway impact fee system, selecting more lines, pulling back based off a percentage, and so we can give credit to folks for that construction, where in the past they wouldn't have. They would have paid to build it, they wouldn't have always gotten credit for it kind of going forward. And that infrastructure can be expensive to build. Do you remember what the acronym was? Just because we traded that email today, did it have that water line cost? No, okay, never mind. Sorry. Bad example. But keep in mind that the cost to build the infrastructure is often substantial. And so one of the benefits of the system is the folks who are building are more likely to get credit and full credit than they would have before.
It seems like we have a split council, but I think it will give us enough time to digest by the time you come back April 1st, and I think you'll have to present both sides so that we can get the council to decide direction we're going in.
And we'll check with EDC, and we'll have that input for you to help make a decision. It's just a tough one. I mean, I will say this,
yes,
this is one of the toughest decisions you're going to make, because there's no perfect, easy answer.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Mayor.
Councilmember Westbrook, you have final thoughts?
Yeah, so are you saying we're a split council in terms of
Well, it's
immediate or split or phase-in?
2-3, and we're missing 2, so I don't know which direction the council is going
Okay.
in.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All right, we'll move on to item number 9, workshop regarding temporary sign enforcement, specifically in relationship to inflatable and balloon signs and feather flags. Delgado.
Good evening, Council. Here to talk about temporary signs again. A little different tonight, though. We're talking about enforcement of temporary signs in relation to the proposed UDC language that we talked about at the February meeting. So as some background, right, keep everybody's brain into this. So from November 2024 through February 2025, we have given several presentations, workshops regarding UDC language for temporary signs, specifically really about these 2 types. The wind sign, really that feather flag, and then your balloon, inflatable arm, waving guy. At the February 18th City Council meeting, there was a general consensus made and direction provided to staff to move forward with the language that you see here on the screen in the full UDC Article 11 rewrite that the Planning Division is working on. So I want to touch on what those proposed amendments are. That way we can make sure that we're all still on the same page moving forward. So balloon signs, including the inflatable signs, would be prohibited regardless of size, and feather flags are the only type of wind-driven sign that would be permitted. We're changing the maximum area and maximum height. We're getting away from the stipulation based on the roadway classification. So for maximum area, for all other types of temporary signs, 24 square feet is your maximum. Feather flags are limited to 16. For the maximum height, for all the rest of the temporary signs, it's 4 feet, and then the exception that feather flags can go up to 8 feet. We also looked at the time limitation change, reducing all types of temporary signs from 180 to 120 days, and that temporary sign permits would only be issued in 30-day increments. with the exception that feather flags have a different time limitation, that they're only allowed for 14 days per calendar year. And then the increase from 2 signs to 3 signs for all temporary signs. And then the creation of the reoccurring event permit, which is that 2-day, think like the church festival, that kind of thing, you can have 15 times a year. So we have all of that in our brain. This is what the clean version of that looks like, simplified down. So really what we're here tonight for is, while we are working on that full Article 11 UDC rewrite, which based off of the extensive conversation we had on temporary signs, which is just a small piece in Article 11, staff is really taking our time and going through it very extensively, line by line, with different departments. So it's looking like that full rewrite's going to happen in the next couple of months, May or June timeframe. So while we are working on that, staff is looking for direction on how the City Council would like us to start enforcing the feather flags and the balloon signs. So I have a couple of options we can go through. So option number 1, think of it as kind of the status quo. We're using the current UDC language, because keep in mind, the language that I just showed you, it's still in that draft version, technically hasn't been adopted by City Council. It's not technically code yet. So option 1 would be utilizing the current UDC, which would require a permit for all types of temporary signs, and essentially not allowing any balloon signs or feather flags. Right now, those would be prohibited based off of the traffic and safety concerns. So we could, City Council could advise staff to start using option 1. Go back to basically using the UDC as we were before all these discussions started, until the full Article 11 rewrite happens. Option number 2, we can start enforcing the balloon signs and feather flags based on the direction that we received at the February 18th meeting. So things to note. So that would prohibit all balloon signs. So any business that currently has a balloon sign, staff would be contacting them and telling them that it needed to be removed if City Council votes for or gives staff the direction for option 2. It would also require all businesses that have feather flags on their property to obtain a sign permit, with the stipulation that feather flags are only allowed for 14 days per calendar year. So keep in mind, the feather flags and the balloon signs that you see currently installed on businesses most likely don't have a permit because they wouldn't have been issued one. And they most likely have been up for way longer than those 14 days. So staff would be going out to every property that has a feather flag, telling them it needs to be removed, they need to come in and pull a permit, and that it was only going to be good for 14 days if it's issued. And then option 3, so we can start, staff can only enforce feather flags and balloon signs that are in the right-of-way or create a hazard until that new UDC amendment ordinance has been adopted. I will say this is what staff is currently doing while we've been having these conversations with council. Neighborhood Services has only been enforcing the removal of balloon or feather flags that are within the right-of-way. And since we have scaled back on enforcement, we would conservatively say there's probably 60 to 100 plus feather flags that have been installed on businesses without going through the permitting process. So, like I said at the beginning, ultimately staff is trying to seek direction on how City Council would like us to start enforcement. If you want us to just use the current UDC until the Article 11 rewrite actually happens, if you want us to do kind of this hybrid that we've been doing, only enforcing the right-of-way, or if it's a safety hazard, or start utilizing, the direction that we got on February 18th.
All right, thank you. Mr. Williams, did you have something to say, or no?
No, I think Emily summarized it well. I think we're in a little bit of a conundrum as a staff. I've gotten comments from a variety of council members saying how they would like to see things proceed and asking questions. So I think what we're looking for is just that clarity. We'll do whatever the council desires. We just would like to have a little bit of clarity moving forward. I will comment on option 2, I think it is, where we partially enforce the new regs, or was that 3? The new, I don't know that we really have a legal basis to do that if we were to cite somebody, but that would just be my comment on that. Okay. If we brought it to municipal court, maybe Dan could comment on that.
It's, before I open it up to council, Maggie, you represent a lot of businesses. I would love to have your input regarding this sign ordinance and which direction you think it will be helpful for this council to make decision on.
Well, the irony is I just had a soon-to-be open business ask me about the feather flags. So that's why I was listening very, very closely. Do we know when the final review is going to come down? What time period are we talking about?
I think it's probably the August timeframe. Is that correct?
We're shooting for May, June.
We'll say August, just in case.
For the full rewrite?
For the full rewrite.
For
For the full rewrite, but for council's decision.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll say the end of June then.
Yeah,
Just to be on the safe side.
I mean, I will be honest, I do like option 3, where if you're already permitting it right now, to go ahead and let them, but I do also know, and Mr. James and I have had discussions about this, about feather flags and the balloon things and how much is too much also. So I don't know if you're already currently permitting now, how can you go back and enforce, and who are you going to enforce? So it is kind of a conundrum that you're in right now, but I would say for myself, unless staff is saying something different, have you seen difficulty when you've gone in for right-of-way enforcement? Has there been a lot of those?
So I'm actually going to turn to Rebecca, our neighborhood services manager, that kind of can speak on kind of the enforcement piece of what we've encountered.
Because safety is totally a different.
Yes, it's a whole different perspective, yes.
So typically businesses do comply when asked, but yes, we have had to ask.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
And they do
Yes,
remove them, there's no problem.
They do
based on where
remove.
it's at, yes.
Typically,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
But currently, just to clarify, we're not quite doing exactly what is stated in the code. So we're not enforcing, we're in a position where we're not enforcing a code that's on the books. And there is some expectation that we should. However, this issue arose because we were enforcing what's in the code. So we're in a bit of a conundrum in terms of what do we do in the meantime until June. It looks like we have a clear path forward of what will be decided in June, but what do we do from now until June is the question at hand. That's really what we would like direction on.
Okay.
Do we rely on the existing code, or do we do one of these other options?
Okay.
So right now, if someone wanted to come in and get a temporary sign permit for a feather flag, it would be denied because it's a prohibited sign based off of the traffic and safety concerns. So the feather flags that you see out in Schertz don't have a permit. They're technically an illegal sign. But while we've been having these conversations, we haven't been going out and actively telling every business that has these, hey, you need to get these feather flags off, they're not permitted. We've only been doing that if they're in the right of way.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, let's, council, floor is open for discussion. Which option do you think our staff needs direction at regarding this enforcement? All right, Councilmember Macaluso.
I think you're going to get multiple opinions on it, but I myself is for for option 1. I would prefer that we keep it how it is until we figure out what we want to do. And I think that it's a good illustration of if no enforcement, what will happen is people will just start putting them up all over the place.
Okay, Councilmember Davis.
I kind of agree with option 1. My only concern is the current UDC has provisions for like feather flags, correct?
They would be classified as a wind sign, but in our prohibited sign section, it talks about interference with traffic and safety, and that's where those feather flags would be classified.
And I can understand where if they're in the right of way, they could interfere with traffic. But, you know, I won't single out a business, but if you have a business and they've got a feather flag that's by their front door on their property and it's 20 or 30 or 40 feet from the roadway, I don't see how we turn around and say that's causing a traffic concern. And if the argument from the city or from the staff is, well, it's flapping in the wind, well, there's 1,000 other things that they can put on the front of their building, you know, the little pendant stringers or whatever else, or the flashing open sign window or the flashing sign that says open in their front window that's flashing, that can cause somebody to turn their head and be distracted. I think it's a rather presumptuous to say that any feather flag that's out there is a traffic safety concern. So, I mean, I'm okay with one, enforcing the current code. I just think that to me, it's the interpretation of what's causing a traffic safety concern. If they have a feather flag or two back on the property off the road, I don't think it's the end of the world. If it's right up on the property line, if it's up by their entrance, then that may be a concern. So, I mean,
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think a little bit where staff's conundrum is we feel like we've got solid, clear direction from council on temporary signage that isn't going to change in a couple of months. In some ways, it seems problematic that we're going to enforce something that we know we're going to ease up on when we run the ordinance. The flip side is I can appreciate the concern, but if you don't do anything now, it more and more, and now you got this bigger problem to enforce. And so part of what staff was trying to do, how we kind of get to it with the different interpretation, is some middle ground to allow some of it more consistent with what we're going to in that intervening period.
and that's the concern I have. I mean, so if we turn around and ban balloon signs, but allow feather flags going forward, even if it's for a lesser amount of time and a limited number of signs, you're still going to have that gray area of now of someone coming back and saying, well, is this visually impairing traffic? Is it too, I mean.
If I may, and I apologize for interrupting, the proposed ordinance, we're just banning balloon signs outright. It's
Correct.
not based on distraction. It's a policy direction on the part of council going no to the balloon signs. And so again, I only offer this. If council is starting to struggle again with what that proposed ordinance look like, then that's a little bit of why I think staff was hesitant to get out and aggressively enforce till we're solid. So I apologize, Councilman Davis.
Councilmember Guerrero.
If we're just talking about from now until we make a final decision, absolutely, we need some type of order. So I agree with option one. We have to have something in place right now, because you're right. If somebody comes and they're asking for a temporary sign and we have nothing, that's just, not only because it does make it look bad, but it's going to get worse. So we definitely need some type of order. I agree with option one.
Okay. Council, any other comments? No, we're going, well, no.
See if he gets us there.
Councilmember Westbrook.
For consensus purposes, I'll go and throw my hat in and say option number one. That way, at least you have three out of the council members with option one, and that way, status quo keeps it there until we can make a final decision in June.
So if that's the case, then what we'll do is we'll go out and enforce on it. So with option one, then you want to go back to it just so we're real good, is we will keep enforcing that prohibition and none. And then again, when we come back with the ordinance, it likely will ease up, and then we'll start allowing them at that point once that goes into effect.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we got direction, right? All right.
Very clarity.
All right, we'll move on to item number 10, which is a closed session. The City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code. Deliberations regarding economic development negotiations, closed meeting. The governmental body is not required to conduct an open meeting under item number 1 to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information that the governmental body has received from a business prospect that the governmental body seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the governmental body, and with which the governmental body is conducting economic development negotiations, or item number 2, to deliberate the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect. This is in reference to Project E99, and the time is 7:19. We will reconvene after our discussion. Okay, the time is 7:52. We reconvene into our regular session after our discussion and deliberation regarding our closed session. Agenda item number 11, reference item number 10, Project E99. Our start time was 7:25. Our end time was 7:51. There is a resolution for council's decision. That's resolution number 25R032. Resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an expenditure as reflected in an Economic Development Performance Agreement between the City of Schertz Economic Development Corporation and Eastwood Properties and other matters in connection therewith. Council, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 25R032?
So move.
Second.
Have a motion made by Councilmember Macaluso, second by Councilmember Guerrero. Council, any other comments? Please cast your vote. We can publish the vote, please. We have 5 ayes, no objections. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on. Requests and announcements by City Council. Well, no, Council, any possible updates or information requested from staff? Council, is there any items you'd like to place on the future agenda? Councilmember Westbrook?
I don't know about a future agenda, but I saw some new names on the people we recommended for the boards. Is there an opportunity that we could meet them? I don't know them. So I don't know if there's like maybe a session in the future, like, I don't know if there's an opportunity that we can meet people that's all.
Okay, well, our city manager and myself will.
Yes, sir.
We'll discuss and see what we can do there. Okay. All right, Council, any events or items of interest you'd like to mention? Councilmember Davis.
Nothing tonight, sir.
Councilmember Macaluso.
Well, a couple of weeks back, we did Clean the Creek, and that was a very pleasant event. Quite a few people were out there. It was a good time.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, the BVYA opening, that was definitely a success. We had about approximately 70 teams, sports teams, baseball, softball, and I'm thinking approximately a little over 3,000 people there, so that was a good turnout.
Councilmember Westbrook.
A brief stay at the chamber luncheon today, and also the school district's community advisory committee, their CAC update, their combined community advisory community update. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Just the chamber luncheon.
Okay. The time is 7:56. We stand adjourned. All right.